Hi, hello beautiful people. My name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. And today we are going to be talking about my favorite romances and the books that they have led me to want to pick up in the future. So obviously when we read a book and we declare it our favorite book, we have this craving to pick up something that gives us that same feeling, something that usually has the same premise or a similar world, or maybe there's a similar trope in it. And obviously we're constantly chasing that high that we felt from reading that original book. Sometimes we do find that, maybe we even find more, and other times it kind of falls short, right? So with this video, the idea is kind of to take the original, these are my favorite romances and this is what I think about them and this is what they're about video that you do see, versus the kind of, if you liked this book then you should read this book, and do a little bit of a spin on it and make it for myself. These are the romance books that I absolutely love, so maybe this is what I should pick up next and I will also love it as well. That is the hope anyway when doing this video. I definitely did a little bit of research while picking these out. It definitely took me a little bit to curate this specific list, just because obviously not every book is going to give you the same feeling, especially if it's one of your favorite books that you're pitting that new book up against. So I'm definitely interested to get these read. I'm hoping to read them all this year and see what I think about them and see if they hold up to my expectations. So I have 5 of my favorite romances, technically 6 because 2 of them are within a series, but I'm going to count them as one, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them and what makes me think that I'm going to love the other book that I'm comparing it to. Let's just go ahead and jump right into the books. And the first romance that I absolutely loved, I read last year, or yeah, it was definitely last year that I read it, and I just fell in love with it, fell in love with the characters, and it's one I definitely would want to reread because I read it before I started my tabbing journey, and I would love to go back to this one and reread it and do some tabbing, maybe even some underlining and highlighting, I don't know yet, but it is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I absolutely fell in love with this story. Just to give you a quick synopsis of this book, it follows Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and Prince Henry from England, and it definitely starts off as kind of an enemies to lovers, but I mean they're not truly enemies. They don't necessarily have this like huge enemy arc or anything, but they definitely do not like each other. They're just kind of annoyed with each other for whatever reason, and they are both at this big event and something happens. They get into kind of a spat and they end up destroying the cake that's at this event. I think it's a wedding, and they just get put all over the tabloids because of this, and their families are obviously scrambling to create better press surrounding this, and so they make them form a friendship that is very public, and they're spending a lot of time together out in the public eye to make sure that these two countries see these two individuals as friends, and it turns into a romance between the two of them. It's got some secret elements to it because no one knows that Henry is gay. Alex did not realize that he liked men at the start of the story. He actually had an on and off girlfriend. It has the really great banter. There's really great side characters who are funny as well. And because there is this obvious need for them to keep their love a secret, there's also some really heartbreaking moments that happen as well that just tore my heart out. But I think it also has some really great discussion behind it about being gay in the public light and what that means for both Alex and Prince Henry. And like I said, this is just one of my favorite ones, and I can't wait to reread this and see what I think about it upon a reread. But because I loved this, I think that I'm going to also love Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This also has 2 gay boys at the front of it and their love. I know everyone loves this. They say it is so adorable, but it also does tackle some very serious topics as well. Another thing that's obviously different about these 2 is that this is a graphic novel series, and I'm just starting to get into graphic novel series, but I think that I'm really going to love this one. Everyone just says it is so wholesome and charming and adorable, and you just fall in love with Nick and Charlie. And I would also love to read some of Alice Oseman's other work. I know she kind of has her own little universe that includes these characters in some of her other stories as well. But I think what really makes these 2 stories so similar is that they both follow people who are coming to terms with their own sexuality and what that means for them, and being true to yourself and being open to who you are. And I just think that because of that, I'm going to really, really love this story as much as everyone else does. So the next one is one that I don't own a copy of, and it is actually a series. It is by one of my favorite romance authors, Jessica Hawkins, and it is the Cityscape series. The first book is called Come Undone, and this follows a woman who is married, and she is at this event with her husband and a couple of friends, and she sees this man across the way, and there's this instant connection between the two of them. So this does involve cheating, and I know that that's something that not a lot of people enjoy reading about, but in my books, it's fine. I really enjoyed the angst and the drama behind it, and Jessica Hawkins just did a really great job of convincing me that these two people absolutely belong together. And so over the course of the 3 books in the series, you see her come to terms with her failing marriage and falling in love with this new man who seems to be perfect for her. It's a series that has really stuck with me, and I think about quite often. I've never reread it, but I would definitely love to own the books physically and eventually do a reread one day. This is the one I did have trouble finding a book that might be relatable, and I think the book I chose is still a bit of a long shot, but it seems to have some of the similar elements in it. But it is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, which is part of a companion novel series called Hoops. And in the first book particularly, the synopsis is a little bit vague. It's kind of got like a poem written for it, but it seems to be talking about a woman who has been with this man. He is an NBA player, and that's what the entire series is kind of based upon, is the world of NBA and the men within it falling in love. And this particular first story follows a woman who seems to have been with a man previously who is in the NBA. The synopsis mentions that he is kind of a fraudulent prince, so something happens and she's not happy with him, and then enter another man that she has instant chemistry with and does fall for. So I'm not sure that this one necessarily has the cheating aspect, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for when I go into a story. But I definitely think that this one has a bit of a forbidden aspect to it based on some of the reviews I read, to try to avoid spoilers, but also try to get a little more detail on the story because the synopsis is so vague. But I just think that I'm going to really enjoy this one. I've heard really good things about the Hoops series and Kennedy Ryan's writing, and I've never read it before. I just think I like that aspect of going from someone who you think is going to be your forever person, and then you realize they're not right for you, and then finding the person who is absolutely right for you that you did not realize was out there. And I think that that's what these two stories have in common, and I think that's what's going to make me really love this one, just like I loved the Cityscape series by Jessica Hawkins. And the next one I'm going to talk about is definitely one you've seen here on BookTube, but it is Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. And this follows a girl who is in a relationship with a guy who isn't exactly the greatest. He's kind of failing her in more than one aspect, and something happens at the beginning of the story and they're having money issues. They're no longer going to be able to afford their rent, so they decide to move in with his dad, who she has never met before, and he actually has kind of an estranged relationship with his dad a little bit. So there's definitely a bit of a rocky situation going on there, but they move into the house with him and she ends up falling in love with the dad. There is no cheating in this story. If that is something that bothers you, I will say that this is definitely a slow burn story, but the payoff is so worth it. I absolutely loved it. I was sitting on pins and needles waiting for them to finally take action. This is another one that I would really, really love to reread, especially now that I own it physically, and one that I decided to compare it to. It doesn't have necessarily a similar premise, but it does in the fact that it has kind of that taboo element, but I think this one is probably a little bit more taboo, and it's definitely the most questionable I have on here because of the premise. I'm a little bit unsure of how I'm going to feel about it, but it is Torn by Carrie Ann Cole, and this follows a girl who falls in love with her dad's best friend. Now, the reason that I am a little bit unsure about this one is because the woman, the female main character, has known this man her entire life. So he's known her since she was a baby, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to feel about that. It's definitely going to be up to Carrie Ann Cole's writing. I think that it could definitely be written in a way where it doesn't make it seem as bad as it originally sounds when you read the synopsis. This is one that I've had my eye on for a while. One of the romance booktubers that I followed for a long time before I even knew BookTube really existed has recommended this one for a very long time, and so I've had my eye on it. I've also had my eye on a few of Carrie Ann Cole's other romances, so That's another thing that kind of makes me unsure because I haven't read anything from this author before. This is the one that could be definitely the most risky, but I think based on the few taboo romances I've read and what I've determined I like and dislike, that this one could be one that I do enjoy. So we will see about that. And then next I have probably the most obvious comparison, but we'll say that in the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy, my favorites are definitely The Deal and The Score, which The Deal follows Garrett and Hannah, which is the kickoff to the series, and it follows Garrett, who needs a study partner. He sets his sights on Hannah, who has been getting great grades in the class that he needs help in, and she has some problems of her own that she needs kind of help working through. I think this particular story and series is what kind of jump-started my love for companion novels, and so The Deal is definitely one that stays high on my ranking. But The Score, which is Allie and Dean's story, is absolutely my favorite. Dean is just a fantastic love interest, and he is Garrett's best friend from the first book, and Hannah's best friend is Allie from the first book as well. So Dean and Allie are kind of, they can't stand each other. Dean has this bad boy heartbreaker reputation, and Allie is actually just getting out of a bad relationship, and they kind of set up this secret benefits relationship that they have going on, and they don't want their friends to know about, and they obviously fall in love and become much more serious. And I just absolutely love this story. To see Dean's growth is absolutely phenomenal in this book, and that is why it's definitely my favorite. Now, the very obvious comparison is that this has led me to believe that I enjoy hockey romances, despite this being only one of the few that I've read, even though I know nothing about hockey. But what this story has made me want to pick up is the Kings of Rittenhouse series by Maya Hughes, and I have no idea of the synopsis of these. I just know they're also hockey romances. Now, I don't hear about them as much as I hear about the Off-Campus series, but that doesn't mean that I don't think I'm going to enjoy them any less. There's definitely probably going to be some in the series that I enjoy more than others, and I will say that on Goodreads, the first book doesn't have as high of a rating as the later books in the series, which is interesting because The Deal and Off-Campus, which is the first book, is one of the most beloved in the series for everyone. So I mean, there's not much more to say about this one. I guess we'll just have to see if they are comparable and if I do love this one as much, or maybe even close to as much as I love this one. And then finally, we have the romance that is my absolute fave. It was my favorite book of last year, and it is none other than People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is, I've said it once and I'll say it a million times, this is absolutely Friends to Lovers perfection. I never thought that I could love Friends to Lovers so much. In the past, when I've read it, it's kind of been a bit cheesy. You've got this jealous friend who doesn't want to admit that he loves the main character, and it kind of gets to be a little silly almost. But before I get ahead of myself, let me just give you a synopsis about this if you haven't heard it. At this point, I'm not sure what rock you're living under, but anyway, this follows Alex and Poppy, who have been best friends since college, and then something happened that we don't know about that led to them having a bit of a falling out, and they no longer take the yearly summer vacation that they used to. And the reason they always took that vacation is because Poppy kind of has her own travel blog, and she would write about their travels and the fun that they had in these different places all around the world. And now that they've had this falling out, they no longer take this vacation, but Poppy has come to realize that she's not as happy as she was when Alex was in her life. She reaches out to him and asks him to join her for at least one last hurrah, and she's hoping that they can reconcile and repair their friendship, but it obviously turns into so much more. There's so much that they have to unpack and kind of confront, and the build up to that summer where they had that big falling out, the anticipation for that moment is so high that you just keep turning pages to figure out what happened between the two of them, because there is a dual timeline. You get to see this current summer, the current vacation they're on, versus the previous vacations they took, which really helps because you get to see how their relationship formed and why they care so much about each other and what they really mean to each other. And Emily Henry is now solidified as my favorite author, despite this being the only book I've read by her. I will read anything she writes. There was an Instagram post not too long ago that was like, I'll read Emily Henry's grocery list. Like, no problem. And that's exactly how I feel. Yes, this is absolutely my favorite romance. This is just top tier for me. So finding a story that I love as much as this one is going to be very interesting to see. So I do actually have two options that I think I might love as much as this one. The first one being The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert. I've heard that this is also really great friends to lovers. I've also heard that I'm going to fall in love with the romance interest because he is hot, and I can't wait. So what I know about this story is that Jasmine ends up having a plumbing issue in her home and she has to move in with Raul. So they become roommates for a bit, but what she doesn't know is that Raul has been in love with her for the entire 7 years that they've been friends, I think. And this obviously is going to be the catalyst for them to be truly falling in love. And I already know that I really, really love Talia Hibbert's writing style. And I think this is one that I don't hear much about, but I do have a few friends who absolutely adore this story. And it's been on my TBR for a while. I've had it on my January TBR. It's on my February TBR. So I'm hoping to get to it this month. I think this is going to be the one that could most closely match my love for People We Meet on Vacation. The other one that I'm comparing based on the premise alone, not necessarily the writing style, but it is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Now, I have read some Christina Lauren books and they all kind of fall middle of the road for me. I do enjoy their writing style, but I've seen a lot of things about this one, but the premise about this just sounds so closely matched to People We Meet on Vacation that I could not put it on this list to compare it, because this is also a friends to lovers story, two friends who no longer talk to each other, and then for whatever reason they're forced back into each other's lives. And it's also dual timeline. We get their friendship as it grew, and then the current timeline as I guess they're kind of reconciling and working out their differences. And so like I said, that sounds exactly like the premise here. I've seen a lot of people also say that this one is really emotional, so it'll definitely be interesting to see if this is my favorite Christina Lauren that I've read so far, because like I said, the other ones have definitely been okay, but they're not anything that I would write home about. I just knew that I couldn't go without putting this one on the list because it is so similar. And so there you have it. Those are my 5 favorite romances. I definitely have some other romances that could be considered a favorite or well loved by myself, but I didn't really have any books to compare them to. But these are definitely top tier for me. I absolutely love them, and I'm always looking for books that give me the same feeling that they do. And I definitely want to know if you have read any of the books that I plan on reading to compare to my favorites and what you think about them. Do you think the comparison will match? And then if you have read any of my favorites, please tell me what you thought about them as well below in the comments. Of course, I need to remind you to be sure to check the description where you can find links to my socials and other resources like my book of the month link and my script link if you're interested in signing up for either of those. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
I was down until you saved me, until you set me free. My eyes were closed, now I see clear as day, and I just wanted to say that you can take me high.